So at 300 meters above Paris, the wind doesn't sound like wind. It scrapes against iron, whistles through rivets, vibrates in the hollow ribs of the Eiffel Tower like breath inside a metal lung. Up here, the city is silent, almost unreal. Just a carpet of lights and roofs, churches and boulevards too distant to touch. And yet in the middle of this exposed machine of steel and bolts, there is a door. A simple, almost modest wooden door that should not be here, at the highest accessible level of the most visited monument on Earth. Behind it, there is a room that was never meant for crowds, never meant for tickets, never meant for the public at all. A room built inside a national symbol, but reserved for one man. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to the beginning. If stories like this make you look at famous monuments differently, not as postcards, but as systems built on power, control, and silence, consider staying with this channel. And tell me in the comments, if you could open one locked room in any monument in the world, which one would you choose? Because this one at the top of the Eiffel Tower was chosen before everyone else, by the man who designed it. To understand why this room exists, we need to return to the Paris of 1889. Paris, late 19th century. The city is a construction site wrapped in smoke and electricity, tram lines and gas lamps. France is still bleeding from past wars, but determined to prove to the world that it has not only survived, it has reinvented modernity. The Exposition Universelle of 1889 is announced as a spectacle of technology, industry, and empire. Nations arrive with machines, engines, pavilions, and promises. But France wants something more than inventions. It wants a vertical statement, a structure so high, so audacious, that no one could mistake who has taken control of the future. That is when the name of one engineer begins to move through ministries, salons, and editorial rooms: Gustave Eiffel. Known for his bridges, his viaducts, his iron skeletons that seem to float above rivers and valleys, Eiffel is both admired and feared. His work bends metal into grace, but his projects are expensive, controversial, and always on the edge of what seems possible. When his proposal for a 300-meter tower wins the competition, he is not just designing a building. He is designing an argument, a proof in iron that France can still shock the world. From the beginning, the tower is a machine more than a monument. A system of elevators, wind calculations, expanding and contracting metal, foundations that sink deep into the ground to keep this impossible skeleton standing. Teams of workers climb lattice beams, suspended above emptiness, installing more than 18,000 pieces of puddled iron. Every day, Parisians stop to watch. Some applaud, others hate it. Famous artists sign letters calling the tower a monstrous factory chimney that will ruin the skyline forever. But the government signs the contracts. The work continues. And inside the plans, almost invisible, a small volume appears near the top. An apartment at the summit. Officially, it is to be used for scientific observations, meteorology, experiments. In practice, something else is being drawn there. A private world carved into the highest point of the new France. At the center of this story stands Gustave Eiffel himself. Not a romantic artist, not a distant bureaucrat, but a man who understands metal, money, and reputation. Born in Dijon in 1832, he builds his career on structures that other engineers consider too risky. He crosses rivers with iron arches, lifts trains over valleys, wraps cities in steel bones that nobody sees but everyone depends on. When the opportunity comes to build the tower, he also negotiates something crucial: the right to exploit the monument commercially for a fixed period. That means restaurants, ticket sales, panoramic views, and access to its most valuable spaces. As the tower rises, Paris sees scaffolding, cranes, and workers hanging in the air. Eiffel sees something more intimate. Fair place where he can be above it all, literally. On the third and highest platform, just under the spire, he begins to shape a 100-square-meter apartment. It is not gilded, not marble, not a royal suite. That is precisely the point. The walls are covered in patterned wallpaper, the floor in simple wood. There are bookshelves, a piano, cabinets filled with instruments, oil paintings, and a small kitchen. There is laboratory equipment for measuring wind, atmospheric pressure, and conducting physical experiments. There is no lavish bedroom, no canopy bed, no heavy curtains. The space is arranged less like a palace and more like the inner mind of an engineer, functional, ordered, private. Down below, visitors queue, climb, observe, and leave. Up here, a single man has a place where he can look down on a city that cannot see him. From the first days of the exposition, rumors begin to spread. It is said that Eiffel has a secret refuge at the top of his tower, a place where no one is allowed to enter. The Parisian elite, amused and intrigued, do what the elite always do when confronted with something they cannot have. They try to buy it. Industrialists, bankers, and aristocrats discreetly send proposals. They offer him incredible sums to rent the apartment for a single night, to host a dinner above the clouds, a discreet meeting, a scandalous rendezvous. Eiffel refuses them all. It is not about money. He already has that, and the tower will bring more. It is about something more difficult to quantify. The right to possess a piece of the sky above a city that believes it owns the horizon. The only people invited into this space are chosen carefully. One of them is Thomas Edison. In 1889, the American inventor climbs the tower and passes through the small door into Eiffel's refuge. The image is almost theatrical. Two men whose inventions have reshaped the modern world, sitting in an apartment suspended over Paris while electric lights burn below, powered by systems both of them helped create. Edison brings a gift, one of his new phonographs, and records a message in Eiffel's private room. The highest point of the city becomes a stage where the future speaks to itself. But something is already wrong. Because while these meetings happen in comfort and privacy, the structure that supports them rests on work that is anything but invisible. Hundreds of men risk their lives installing beams and platforms. Elevators depend on hydraulic systems that need constant attention. The tower, which the public sees as a symbol of progress and beauty, is also a fragile equilibrium of metal. Maintenance and safety margins pushed to their limit. Down below, the tower is defended against critics as a gift to the nation, an open monument for all. Up here, it houses a room that no one else can access, a space that belongs entirely to its creator. The contradiction sits inside the walls of the apartment itself. Public monument, private vantage point. National symbol, personal sanctuary. And that tension will not disappear with Eiffel's death. The story of the hidden apartment continues long after the engineer leaves the stage. As the years pass, the tower survives what was not guaranteed. It had been conceived, in part, as a temporary structure for the exposition, with the possibility of demolition decades later. Many Parisians expected it to vanish once the fair was over, taking its controversial presence with it. But the tower finds new functions. It becomes a platform for scientific experiments, a radio transmission station, later a strategic communications point in times of war. The city that once rejected it slowly adopts it as a symbol. Ironically, the more public its image becomes, the more private the little room at the top turns. Eiffel himself continues to use the apartment for meetings, observations, and quiet retreats. There are nights when the lights of Paris blur into a soft glow through the windows, while inside, the only sounds are the scratch of a pen on paper and the distant hum of wind against metal. The apartment is used for meteorological and physical studies, but also for something less measurable, the preservation of a certain hierarchy. Up here, the engineer moves through a space that confirms his exceptional position in the system he helped build. Then, in 1923, Gustave Eiffel dies. The man vanishes, but the tower remains. And with his absence, the apartment loses its central figure. Over time, its function becomes less clear. Without Eiffel, who does it belong to? Who has the right to occupy the most intimate space in the most public monument of France? Administrators change, departments reorganize, technical needs evolve. The tower's machinery is updated, its elevators modernized, its lighting redesigned to keep up with new expectations from a global tourism industry. But the small room at the top slowly slips out of daily use. Doors stay closed more often. Furniture gathers dust. The space that once hosted conversations that could change careers and reputations turns into a kind of ghost architecture, present in the plans, absent in the collective memory. Visitors continue to climb, take photos, point at the horizon, unaware that above them, behind walls and locked doors, the apartment still exists. Decades turn into generations. The tower appears in films, posters, propaganda, and countless souvenirs. It becomes the background of love stories, political speeches, and national crises. It carries flags, lights, slogans. It's illuminated in different colors to honor causes and tragedies. It is constantly renewed in the public imagination. And yet, for most of the 20th century, the existence of a private apartment at its summit remains almost a rumor, mentioned in specialized publications, occasionally whispered by guides, but rarely seen. The space drifts between uses, storage, technical support, limited access, never fully reclaimed as a living environment. The real drama of the apartment, however, is not in whether it was used or abandoned, but in what it reveals about who truly owns symbols that are sold to the world as belonging to everyone. A monument like the Eiffel Tower does not stay standing by accident. It demands constant surveillance, repair, investment, and negotiation. There are contracts, concessions, security teams, maintenance crews, political decisions. The tower is a vertical city of invisible workers. Technicians who check the bolts, electricians who maintain the lights, cleaners who remove the fingerprints of millions of tourists. Most of them will never cross the threshold of the apartment at the top. Their routes end at service corridors, machine rooms, platforms below the summit. The room that was once Eiffel's remains above them, out of reach, part of a layer of the monument that you cannot access with a ticket. In that sense, the apartment becomes a symbol twice over. First, of the power of a single man to carve out private space inside a national icon. Later, of how that privilege can simply be absorbed into an institution, passed from hands to hands, without ever becoming truly public. The tower becomes state property, managed by companies regulated by authorities. The apartment shifts from personal asset to institutional secret. But the logic remains. In a structure that millions experience, there is always a higher floor that most will never see. Before we move to the final chapter of this story, and to what was eventually done with this room, take a moment to notice how you feel about it. If this hidden apartment has already changed the way you look at monuments, if it has made you think about who really controls the top floors of the systems we admire, consider subscribing to this channel. And tell me, knowing what you know now, do you think this room was just a harmless privilege or a visible crack in the story we tell ourselves about what is public? The answer may not be simple, and that is exactly why this place matters. In the 21st century, as tourism explodes and the Eiffel Tower receives millions of visitors every year, the administrators of the monument face a decision. What do you do with a space that was once secret and personal, then forgotten and dusty, but now offers something that the public craves? A glimpse behind the curtain. The answer arrives in the form of restoration. Using historical records, descriptions, and surviving elements, the apartment is carefully recreated. Wallpaper patterns are chosen to match the originals. Furniture is selected to evoke the modest, yet carefully curated taste of Eiffel. Cabinets, paintings, and instruments are positioned as they might have been. Wax figures of Gustave Eiffel and Thomas Edison are installed, frozen in eternal conversation, as if the visitor had just opened the door on a meeting suspended in time. But there is a crucial difference between the past and this new version. The apartment is no longer a private room. It is now an exhibit, visible through protective glass. Visitors can't walk freely inside. They approach, look through, and observe a scene arranged for their gaze. The space that once protected the presence of a living man now protects the illusion of that presence. The intimacy becomes museum material. For many tourists, it is a delightful surprise, a secret discovered at the top, a curiosity to tell friends about. For others, it passes quickly, just one more stop in a long chain of photos and views. But if you linger a little longer, the room still carries its heavier questions. Because what this apartment reveals is not just the personality of an engineer who wanted a quiet place to escape the noise of the world. It reveals the structure of privilege embedded into the architecture of modernity itself. The Eiffel Tower was built with public money, on public land, by workers whose names few remember. It was presented as a triumph of national genius, a symbol of an entire people. Yet at its summit, The prime space was claimed by an individual, not a king, not an elected leader, but a man whose power came from his ability to turn technology, capital and imagination into something the world could not ignore. That, in the end, is the dark story of the hidden apartment. It is not dark because of crime or scandal or blood on the walls. It is dark because it shows with almost embarrassing clarity how even our brightest symbols of progress are built with rooms that are not for us, rooms where decisions are made, where deals are struck, where silence is preserved. Today, you can stand below the tower and feel like it belongs to everyone. You can ride the elevators, eat in the restaurants, stare at the city from behind safety railings. You can look up at the iron skeleton glowing against the night sky and feel part of a shared experience. But somewhere above you, behind glass and staged lighting, there is still a reconstructed room that remembers a different story, one in which the man who built the cage kept the only key to its most privileged corner. The last image this story leaves us with is simple. A small apartment suspended inside a web of iron, a wooden door that no longer opens, a piano that no one plays, two figures frozen in conversation while the city moves on outside. The crowd presses against the glass, trying to see everything. But the true subject is not what is inside that room. It is the invisible line that separates those who can cross that threshold from those who never will.